All right, good day to everybody. Welcome to Faith Seeking Understanding. I am Allan Bevere, your host. I am a pastor, retired, a professor, a Bible moth, a exile and foreigner in a strange land, and it's getting stranger every day. And I am a peddler of hope because you always have to have hope. And I am the self appointed Anselm of Canterbury Chair of Podcast Theology and Culture at Faith Seeking Understanding University, a completely fabricated institution of higher learning, but where all seekers are invited to ponder profound things. And this is our last episode of the year of Calmly Considered. And I have with me my traveling partner, Michael Cruz,
Grand Poobah.
who is the Grand Poobah Chair of Economics and Public Theology here at Faith Seeking Understanding. Michael, how you doing today?
I am doing pretty well. It's kind of a dark, gloomy day here in Kansas City, but it's Christmas season and it's supposed to be that
It
way.
is. Well,
Yeah,
it's dark and gloomy here, and we've got rain and a little bit of spitting of snow, but it is what it is. It's December, and if you really can't stand it in Ohio, then just move south, right?
that's right.
I know a lot of people who have.
Right.
So, anyway. All right, let's talk a little sports. So, football.
Yeah.
Well, your Chiefs played my Browns, and it wasn't much of a contest. I didn't think that it would be.
Yeah.
Um, Jameis Winston, who is really a talent. I mean,
Yeah.
he gets in his own way.
Yeah.
And I certainly would never claim to know football enough to know, but he doesn't seem to have a sense of the field of vision and throwing passes, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he just throws lots of interceptions. So he's been benched. We're getting our DTR, our other quarterback. Yeah, the season's over,
Right.
and the
Right.
Browns. I have to tell you. I think Kevin Stefanski's a good coach. I
Yeah.
know there are people that want to get rid of him.
Right.
I think the thing with Deshaun Watson is the albatross around their neck. I think
Yeah.
they for some reason saw this as a quick fix to their problem, and it's not been, and it's been
Right.
bad.
Right.
And for the next two seasons, they're really strung up by the salary cap, and they said that they still have confidence in him for next year.
Right.
I don't know what else they're going to do but so for the next two seasons for the Browns, it's going to be more famine than feast, that's for sure.
I think you're right. Yeah. It's going to hurt. So,
It's going to hurt. But now your Chiefs, little scary there at the end of the game last Sunday,
oh,
wasn't
yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes hobbling off there.
But also, after they taped his ankle, he's walking back and forth up down,
Yeah,
fuming that they won't allow him in the game. So,
he's
I
a
mean, yeah, he
gamer.
was he
He's a
was real
gamer.
seriously injured.
Yeah, he's a gamer. I think, you know what? I'm wondering, and I think it's probably a good idea. I'm sure
Yeah.
Mahomes doesn't want that, but at least have him, they're playing these games within this close period of time that Mahomes was
Right.
sit him for at least a game.
I think so. Yeah, I think the issue is they have to win two of the next three. I should back up. Buffalo, I think their last three games of the season are all against teams that have three wins. So I
Okay.
mean, they're
Yeah.
they're going to win out the rest of the season
Yeah.
most likely, and the Chiefs need to win two of the next three,
Okay.
two of the last three, in order to get that number one bye.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
that's some
So
of what's
that's in the mix. Yeah.
yeah.
But
So,
Josh Allen, he just continued.
wow.
We were watching Buffalo, and I said to Carol, I said, the year that he was drafted, the Browns had a chance to get him and passed.
Yeah, of course, yeah,
Of
right.
course. And this is the story
What
of
might have
Cleveland.
been, yeah.
Yeah, the story of
Uh,
Cleveland. But wow,
so
he's
yeah,
just
it's.
been.
I tell you, if watching them play the Lions, I mean, it was pretty impressive. They're looking
Yeah.
pretty Super Bowlish. If the Chiefs
Yeah.
don't make it, I think
We
they're going to
might,
be the Bills.
what,
So,
regardless of who's there, we may be in for a good Super Bowl. So
yeah, I think so. Be
that's
fun.
good anyway. And then, of course, baseball is coming up. I mean,
Yes,
I always, I just, it's what I pine for at this time of the year. There's always hope
right,
when pitchers and catchers report in a couple of months. So
right,
anyway,
exactly.
we'll see how
Yes,
that goes. Yeah, we
hope
got
springs.
rid of Andre Jimenez. I don't know if you saw that, our second baseman, our Gold Glove
Yeah.
second baseman. We traded him.
Okay.
But I guess the good news is when you got a lot of talent, if you want to improve it, you got to trade good talent, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
boy, wow. I mean, we're good at second base. We got a lot of talent there, so I think that's why.
Right.
All
Well, the
right.
Royals traded for Jonathan India to get a second baseman, but it's primarily more about his on base percentage. I think Bobby Witt had the record this year for most at bats over a certain number of at bats, like
Yeah.
500. Had the most at bats without a runner on base ahead of him this year of any
Oh,
major leaguer
okay.
in the season. So can't drive in
You
RBIs.
can't
Nobody's
drive in
running him.
RBIs. You
Yeah,
can't do that.
so
Yeah.
they're going to have him. He had like 85 walks last year or something like that. His batting average is pretty average, but he gets
Yeah.
lots of. So
Okay.
anyway, they're building their season. We'll see what happens. They
We'll
made it to
see
the
what happens.
playoffs last year, which was pretty remarkable for them.
Yeah.
So see.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. All right, Michael, let's get on to the task at hand. We're going to
Yeah.
spend a little time year in review and look at 2025. So I will begin this conversation by saying to you, I will no longer predict the outcomes of elections.
Yeah.
Over the last decade, if I were a bookie,
Yeah.
nobody would trust me.
You're
I
right.
have been wrong, wrong, and wrong, and so I'm done. I'm just
Right.
not going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
that's how I'm going to start the conversation.
There you go. Well, and I predicted too that I suspected that she would be able to hold the blue wall, but I wasn't sure about what could happen beyond that. And it turned out she just narrowly missed that blue wall. I mean, it
Yeah.
was, um, and I think in my hindsight, there's lots of things we can look back as to why that happened. But yeah, I we make predictions, but for me, predictions are always hedged. That
Well, they're always hedged. Yeah.
you just can't
It's
tell.
interesting. It's interesting as the votes have now all been counted. It was a lot closer. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think the morning after the election, we were looking at the numbers thinking, "Holy cow!"
She
the
lost by 4 percentage points or
but
something.
it really was a close election.
It was. He didn't win
Um,
50% of the vote. I think he got 49.8 or something like
yeah.
that.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't nearly. And I know that when once your party loses the election, you've got to do a lot of analysis as to what happened wrong. But I'm going to start the conversation out by saying this. I think it was less what the Democrats did wrong and more about the fact that 77 million, I think I've got that number right,
Yeah.
77 million Americans voted for somebody, a president who was the sitting president in American history who attempted to overturn a free and fair election,
Right.
and used considerable resources to do it.
Right.
The only They voted for a person who clearly, you don't have to be a certified psychologist to see how emotionally broken this man is and that he's
Right.
a narcissist. And anybody who knows narcissism will tell you, you don't put a narcissist in charge
Right.
of anything. But we did that. He spoke about immigrants of color as animals and not even human. He spent his rallies uh, you know just nothing but spewing darkness and spewing hatred, and 77 million people voted for him.
Right.
And so I want to say that what this election was is that it's a sad revelation of who we are.
Right.
And it's not to say that we Americans haven't done some good things. I'm certainly would never say that. I mean, we led the way in rebuilding Europe after World War II, right? Under the Marshall Plan, which
Right.
was a great thing.
Right.
But we harbor some very unsavory beliefs and ideas. Okay, I'll stop
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I think that's a very big piece of it. I think that's a huge part of the reason that Harris didn't lose the election. I mean, didn't win the election. I think that another piece of this that also feeds in, and you mentioned what I think is one half of the equation, or maybe more than half, but it's the big piece of it. I think the other big piece of it is anti-incumbency. I think they said in 2024 was the first election in many years that since they followed these things that electing an executive in a major country over 2024, the incumbent lost every election.
Yeah.
And the issue for a lot of people, I think, having had COVID, you had the inflation spike and trying to bring things back to normalcy. They aren't back to normalcy yet in terms of what existed. And they probably won't ever go back to what they were in
Yeah.
2019, but something more closely approaching that. They had not yet reached that point by the time of the election. And I think you have a very strong headwind of being the incumbent. Now, you say, well, Biden was the incumbent. She wasn't. The issue is that, and I think James Carville is the one who pointed this out. He points to this one point as sort of the turning point in the election. She was on The View, the program called The View,
Yeah.
and she was asked, "What would you do different than Joe Biden has done?"
Yeah.
And she paused for 3 or 4 seconds and said, "I can't think of anything."
Yeah.
And if you look at the election results, 65, 70% of people said they were looking for change. And she, I think, had some change. I think she would have done some things differently. I think she had a good vision for where the country needed to go and that kind of thing. But that's not what got communicated.
Yeah.
And that made Donald Trump the change candidate.
Yeah.
And I think there were some people, particularly those people who don't pay attention to politics, who don't follow the news like you and I do, who just heard, oh, Donald Trump and he's going to fix the economy. Well, okay. And there's no intellectual energy at
Well,
all expended trying to, decide
let's
what
be honest.
they
The vast majority
yeah,
of Americans have no clue how the economy works.
right.
And
Yeah.
and we need to quit. I mean,
It
we
drives me
just
crazy.
need to
Yes.
quit. We just need to quit trying to help people figure this out because I don't think they really care.
Right.
I think they've got certain views of their own politics and the economy. And so, when your guy is in office and the economy's good, you point to the good stuff and ignore the bad. And when the other person is in, you point to the bad stuff and ignore the good.
Right.
So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So,
Right.
it's just a waste of time. Everybody said, and we all knew this, economics 101, you get a pandemic, a global pandemic, you inject stimulus
Right.
into the economy, and the result will be inflation, right?
Right.
And there's other factors there too. But again, you know, so it's Biden's president. We have inflation. It's
Right.
his fault.
He's going to get the blame for it.
Yeah.
So that's to me, I think the two key pieces that I think that were part of the Trump victory are the very negative things that you said that people they've abandoned the idea of liberal democracy, of
Yes, they have.
America being a democratic republic. They've abandoned that. I think that's a minority position, but I think it's a significant position. And then I think the other half are people that are just generally frustrated, unable to specifically identify what it is they're frustrated with, but feel like this guy didn't get it done. Let's try this other guy. I think that's the other part of the
Yeah.
equation as well. And I think that was just enough to put him over the top.
Yeah, the other issue to talk a little bit about the immigrant community. I know for a fact that Trump got a lot of his Latino vote, particularly the men.
Right.
And it's interesting because I am connected to the migrant community, and there's post-election a big argument and divide in the Latino community because you had Latino men who voted for Trump because we have to remember some of these Latinos come from countries where they've only known strong men who rule.
Right. Yeah.
And they may not, I mean, and that doesn't mean that they not necessarily support them wholeheartedly, but that's what they know. And so, for them, Trump, speaking
Yeah.
about image,
Yeah.
I mean, Trump he's the biggest sissy.
He's a blowhard. Yes.
He's a
Right.
blowharded sissy, and yet he's got
Yeah.
this image. They voted for him, and also because part of it was they said they didn't believe that he was going to deport families.
Right.
And now, of course, he's doubled down on this since the election. And so
Right.
now there's some real disagreement within the Latino community because there are some people who are angry with these people who voted for Trump because they said you didn't believe,
Yeah.
and I just read a story the other day that about a guy who voted for Trump who now is concerned his family's going to be deported.
Well, sure. Yes. Right.
So,
Right.
um, so there's a whole lot of reasons why people make these decisions that they do.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I I guess we should shift a little bit to something better and say what's happened in 2024 that's been good.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right. Right. Surely there was something. Yeah. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
surely there was something.
Right.
Well, one of the sad parts about this stuff at these times is that it sucks all the oxygen out of the room. So there's stuff
Right.
that's really good. I mean,
Right.
I continue to be amazed at what the Webb Hubble telescope reveals to us.
Absolutely.
It just the pictures and what we're learning is just astounding, Michael. It just is awe-inspiring.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and I was watching one recently. It was talking about has scientists totally confused about these galaxies that formed that shouldn't be nearly the ones that they can see way, way off in the distant universe, and they wait a minute, these galaxies shouldn't be this big, this quick. How did
Yeah, how did
that totally undoes, how they thought the universe came into existence. It's just, and it's like every month or two, it's
yeah.
another one of
I
these.
I uh, I have to say that in my uh, lighter moments, I think to myself that the Almighty is up there with the angels, and He says to them, "Hey, let's see what they'll do about this," and then He
That's
throws some
right. Yeah.
galaxies in there, right?
Right.
Let's see what happens.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reminder to us that while there's lots of stuff we've learned, particularly within the last century,
Right.
a lot of stuff we don't know, and a lot of stuff that just baffles us yet.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, creation's quite an amazing thing. So that's been good. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
you know, I continue to be heartened by what I see as the portions of the church that really are doing good mission and ministry.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of we complain a lot, and understandably so. But when I went to the border, and I did back in June, I went to McAllen, Texas, and went to
Right.
the border and saw what was going on. I was so heartened by the church leaders on both sides of the border and the great ministry that they're doing
Yeah.
to people who are vulnerable, and who have children who have experienced horrific circumstances already in their young lives, and just the great work these people are doing. Just, I came home saddened by their plight, but heartened by the care that they're getting and the people who are basically also not afraid to risk some stuff
Right.
in order to minister to the least of these. So I continue to be heartened
Sure.
that there is the church that's doing its job.
Right.
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 So
Yeah. I think that's I'll detour over to one other thing, come back to some of that in a
sure,
second.
sure.
I was just also say that I think sort of the global trends issue too, that I think the one of the things that was good in 2024 is you're continuing to see the adoption of renewable energy. Solar power
Yes.
continues to become more and more affordable. Solar panels becoming more and more widely deployed. Like electric vehicles, while stalling and slowing some, are still on a very upward trajectory.
Yeah.
And I think particularly with solar energy and I could go up in all sorts of details, thorium, nuclear power, the developments that are happening there, and all these various
Yeah.
experiments, different types of batteries that are being developed to store the solar power that gets developed so that it can be used in off times. I mean, it really is pretty remarkable, the rate of innovation. And I think that has been put on an exponential development scale that is probably unstoppable at this point. And
Yeah.
so I think no matter what future administrations, if somebody like a Trump administration or whoever gets in there, I don't think that can be sidelined
Yeah.
anymore. So I think that there are some positive developments on that front.
Yeah.
Uh, what I was just going to come back and say, and you're talking about the church's response, and I've also was just thinking about our broader negative moment in terms of politics in the United States. I've read Heather is it Heather Richardson Cox? I don't know. She's
Oh, Heather Cox Richardson.
Cox
Yeah.
Richardson. I always get the names mixed up. Cox Richardson. Read some of her stuff in recent months and years. And then also there's a book by, and I don't know if I can pronounce his name correctly. Fareed, is it Zakaria or
Yeah.
Zachariah?
Fareed Zakaria, I think.
Zakaria, yeah.
Yeah.
So he has a book that he published recently that's called Age of Revolutions, and it talks about revolution and counter-revolution from 1600 to the present. And he just talks about going back to the glorious, well, actually the Dutch Revolution in terms of the development of market economies and liberal democracy, the beginning with that then becomes the Glorious Revolution. He talks about the French Revolution, talks about the Industrial Revolution in Britain, and then the Industrial Revolution in the United States. And he talks about how each one of those develops, but as each one of those develops, they also develop counter groups that rise in opposition to them,
Yeah.
and then those groups are eventually subsumed, and then you move on to the next wave of revolution. And I really go I in the big picture, the larger picture stuff of this. I really think that the 21st century is the issue of globalization versus nationalism. And I think that
Yeah.
globalization has made a tremendous impact in what we're seeing in the world. And what you're seeing right now is the counter revolution to some of that is trying to assert itself, that's saying, wait, 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 we don't want to go there. We don't want to do this. And there's always a portion of the population that's there. And what we're seeing is the resistance
Yeah.
to that globalization occurring. And I think globalization ultimately prevails.
Yes.
I think that eventually it becomes a globalized community that operates collectively together. And as I've said this before, that doesn't mean that there aren't dark periods
Yeah.
on the path to that.
Yeah.
And as I suggested, I've said this 2 or 3 times here. I think that if you look at the development of human well-being from the late 1700s up to the present, it's been very good for humanity. Humanity is in a far better place.
Yeah.
But that place also included genocides. It included World War I and World War II. The Great Depression. It included some pretty bad stuff on the journey to that. And so I think while our moment may be bad, and it could potentially get much worse than it is at the moment, I do think that for our children, at least, maybe still within our lifetimes, but certainly for our children and grandchildren, I think that it does eventually get better.
Yeah.
So I try to keep that perspective. And I was bringing up Zakaria because that's sort of the image. It's not inevitable. He's not saying it's inevitable if that's where we end up, but that's where, if you look at the past, I think things end up. So seeing the church, and I think you're pointing to something else that I think is important to look at. In a moment where there is so much negative going on and there's much to be concerned about, I think we can also choose to look for where the good is as well. That's not saying ignore the bad that's going
Right.
on, but we can also look for the good that's going on and point to that as well, lift that
Exactly.
up. And I think that that's important for our well-being and for our mental state.
Yeah.
To do
You know,
that.
I have to tell you, I'm very blessed in my life that I get to mentor several young clergy, which is a gift for me.
Mhm.
But I meet with them once a month, and they're struggling. A lot of these young clergy are
Oh,
struggling
sure.
with what's going on.
Yeah.
And one of the things I keep saying to them, because they're young, you know, and they want to change the world,
Right.
right?
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, and you get old like us, and it's like, really? Anyway.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I tell them, I say, you know what? And they're frustrated. I say, you
Mhm.
know what? Focus on the little picture. And what I mean by that
Right.
is in your congregations, you've always got at least a small percentage of people who are going to listen to you,
Right.
who you can bring along. The people who, as Jesus said, have ears to hear.
Right.
If you think you're going to somehow, by your preaching, completely transform your entire church, it ain't going to happen.
Right.
It's not means that those people are unimportant. It doesn't
Right.
mean that you don't minister to them. But if you put your focus on that, you're going to continue to be frustrated.
Right.
So what you need to do is focus on the places, the small places, the enclaves,
right,
where change happens. And that's, by the way, that's where change does happen, doesn't it? I
right.
mean,
That's right. Yeah,
when you talk about revolutions on a big scale, it's got to start small somewhere.
that's right. Yeah,
So that's where we need to keep the focus, and we don't lose the big picture, but we understand that eventually, if the big picture is going to be shaped over time, it's going to be because we start small.
right. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So
I hear you.
yeah.
I think
All
that's
right.
true. The church, I think it's true in the culture as well too. And I think one of the things that's important to keep our eyes on is that there is um, a strong community, a sizable community that is energized by democratic principles that
Yes.
want to see those succeed, that is working for those. And
Yes.
there are places to plug in and to join those causes. Um, and if you look around the world, I mean, you see some of the stuff happening in Europe. So there's certain countries where the right, the sort of fascist right, is trying to assert itself.
Yeah.
But there are countervailing forces there as well. I think of
Yes.
Bangladesh that just unseated the what was it, the daughter of one of the dictators who's basically effectively acting as a dictator because they want democracy in their country and put Muhammad Yunus, the banker to the poor, put him in as the interim president in order to oversee the government until they can have fair democratic elections to
Yeah.
do that. Europe just sealed a fair trade deal with most of the countries in South America. The free trade zone that they created includes, I think it's 800 million people and is one quarter of the world economy.
Yeah.
And so they are continuing to expand trade and reduce tariff subsidies, that kind of thing. Even as the United States elects a president who wants to go the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So there are countervailing forces
Yeah.
at work in the world, and I think that those are the forces that will eventually prevail. Uh,
Yes. Yes. I
so
have to remember the words of God to Elijah. I've got 7,000 people back there,
that's right.
right?
Yeah.
We tend to think we're alone, but the
Yes.
reality is these forces that we're talking about are not going to go unchecked, and there are
Right.
people who are involved. So one of the episodes for 2025, Michael, has to be, and we really can't do this until after 2025 starts to unfold.
Right.
If Trump gets his tariffs and all of that,
Right.
you talk about what's happening with this free trade agreement. Does the United States and I don't want to get off on this, but one of
Yeah.
the things I want to talk about is is Trump's economic plan, if he gets what he wants, is that
Right.
going to put us behind the eight ball in reference to the global economy?
Right. Yeah.
Which, if it does, it won't be good for us,
Right.
obviously. So
Right.
we'll talk about that. We'll keep that on
Yeah.
the back burner. All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to 2025.
Yeah.
There's a lot of question marks.
Absolutely.
I'll start with Mitt Romney, who did an interview recently and basically said MAGA is now the Republican Party.
It is.
It's no longer a fringe movement. Uh, it is absolutely astounding to me how one deeply troubled individual can so
Right.
transform.
Right.
I do remember, though, the words of Paul when he says, "Bad company corrupts good morals." But
Right.
uh, it's the vital of, and I know you and I believe this. The vital kind of conservatism necessary in a healthy democracy has been exiled.
It sure has.
It's
Yeah.
been exiled. There's no healthy, vibrant conservatism right now in America that has the levers of power.
Right.
And so 2025 in many ways, in some ways, is an unknown. And I'm going to say that because, people could say, well, we've seen one term of Trump. The difference is that, his picks to surround him were conventional for the most part.
Right.
Right. And, you had, in other words, there were these guardrails on him.
Right.
Judging from his cabinet picks and his
Yeah.
picks now, if he gets most of what he wants, and I think he probably will,
Yeah.
there will be few guardrails on what he wants to do. So it
Right.
is really unknown as to how this plays out.
Right. Well, and it's going to be. I'm going to again, and it's like what you were saying a second ago. The range of possibilities of what could develop in 2025 is so wide. It's hard to know what to focus your attention on. And so until you start seeing some actions develop, um, he talked about he was going to bring down food prices. He's going to bring them, all down. So as soon as he's elected, it's like, well, food prices are really hard to bring down. I don't know if we'll be able. He was all big on the transgender stuff. Now that he's elected, it's like, well, I don't know if transgender stuff is all that big a thing. And he's now flipping on what he thinks is important about Ukraine. And I think what one of the EU envoys, or I don't know if it's their Secretary of State or what the exact position was, went to Mar-a-Lago to talk to him and basically convinced him that if Ukraine fails in this, it's all going to be on him. Everybody's going to point to him and say that it was his fault, and that's where the world opinion is going to go. So now he was saying, well, Russia never should have invaded Ukraine in the first place, and
Yeah.
he's going to try to find ways to try to keep Ukraine from
Yeah.
failing. And he was going to solve Ukraine before he even gets elected. I mean, before he even takes office, and that'll all be resolved before, obviously. So anyway, so what's he going to do with tariffs? He says he's going to put in these tariffs. So I'm posing a 25% tariff on Mexico. And then he has talked with Mexico. Mexico agrees to put 100 extra border guards on the Mexican border. Then he comes back and claims, oh, I have this great victory. I've secured the Mexican border because I've got them to, you get the point.
Yeah.
So who knows what he will do and what he actually, what he's saying and what he'll actually do until he starts doing stuff. It's hard to know. I think you're hitting one of the key points in his first administration, being surrounded with more conventional people. I think they were able to keep him from some of his worst and crazy decisions.
Yeah.
He's now surrounding himself with people that are not going to provide that kind of guide. Well, I should say some of them won't. Some of them will. I think he's got some people that are
Yeah.
reasonable folks. But I think Lawrence Tribe. I don't know if you remember who Lawrence Tribe is, but he's a constitutional scholar. I actually wrote a paper back in graduate school in 1984. And he was a scholar at that point, a constitutional scholar. But his point was, he said they want to try all this stuff. Their Project 2025, get rid of all these agencies and all that type of stuff. And I had these other attacks on the legal system and the military and all that type of stuff. He says our Constitution and our civil order, he says, is a dense force of laws and interconnections and that type of thing. It is not easily undone.
Yes.
And he said, and over a year or two, they aren't going to be, this is him basically suggests they aren't going to be able to accomplish much of what they're hoping to accomplish.
Yeah.
And very likely that within that time, with the mood that the electorate is in, they're frustrated with Biden now, they're going to be frustrated with Trump in 2 years.
Yeah.
And so then you have the Democrats getting 1 or 2 houses of Congress.
Yeah.
And so he says that's the more likely direction in which this thing goes. That doesn't mean an awful lot of damage to certain people and certain groups can't happen in the intervening times. But so I think I'm not at the point of I'm afraid that you're going to have in 6 months a total takeover of the United States government by a powerful strongman. But it doesn't have to go to that point for there to not be some really bad things that happen. So
I'm not an alarmist of the people who say, well, now that Trump's elected, we'll have no more elections. And I don't buy any of that. I like the dense forest analogy. And they're not going to be able to do nearly what they want to do. But the reality is, in the meantime, lives are going to be really hurt.
Yeah.
People are going to be damaged. And there will be a lot of fallout on that. So that's what's unfortunate. But I do concur with you, this constitutional guy, even though he knows a lot more than I do about it.
Yeah.
And that is that there's just, I think we have, people talk about a civil war. People talk about a civil war in the 19th century. We're going to have another civil war.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a completely different universe today than it was in 1861. We are the state, you get some people like Texas, some people in Texas say we need to secede from the Union. Good luck with that. I mean, really, I hope you go ahead and secede and lose all the federal aid and now have to start negotiating get your own diplomats to Mexico and other places, right? Good luck with that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Get back to me in 5 years and let me know how that's worked for you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to happen. And so so we have to kind of hang on for the long haul. But in the meantime, there's going to be some really unfortunate damage
Right.
that's going to affect real people in real lives. I think of the immigrant community that I'm close to,
Right.
and some of the things that and by the way, things are happening now that aren't good. But Trump will double down on it, and
Right.
so anyway. But you're right. So 2025, it's hard to tell. Um, I think, you know what I think? You talked about Ukraine going to Mar-a-Lago and stuff.
Yeah.
My concern is I think that that the world leader who is best able to flatter Trump is going to get what they want
Yeah. Right.
because
Yeah.
that's what he needs.
Right.
He's a narcissist. He's insecure. He needs that praise. I think Vladimir Putin knows this. I think every
Yeah.
other world leader knows this, that America has a president who the best way to get what you want is to flatter him and
Yeah.
make him feel like he's,
Right.
the best thing since sliced bread,
You're right.
and
Right.
even better than sliced bread.
Right. Yeah.
And so the person who has the most flattery, smoozing skills
Right.
will be the ones that get what they want. And
Right.
that's really a sad place for America to be in.
Exactly. And I was trying to remember, I can't remember who it was I heard said this recently. They were talking about, so you have these people that come in that try revolutions within countries, to reshape the government and so on. They have ideals
Yeah,
that they're trying to promote, whether they're far right ideals or left wing ideals or centrist ideals. They have ideals that they're trying to promote. The guy's point was Trump has no ideals.
right.
Trump is about deals,
Yeah,
deals that benefit him, deals that benefit him financially, deals that benefit his ego.
yeah,
That's it. That's all
yeah,
there is with Trump.
yeah,
And so I think on the one hand, there's a positive side to that, in that there isn't a coordinated, well thought out, rational plan to institute some new institution of ideals to replace
right.
the ideals that are here. You just basically have a money grubbing grifter
Yeah,
who is a narcissist who is trying to enrich himself off of his position.
yeah. And has
I
done a
think that
good job
that's
with it. Yeah,
and I think that that's where we're gonna be for it. That doesn't mean that there aren't all sorts of people around him
yeah,
who have some other ideals as to what they'd like to accomplish. I guess one of the big question marks I have looking at 2025 and the 2 or 3 years beyond that is eventually Trump is going. I mean, he's
yeah.
going to be gone. He's 78 years old, soon to be 79. Will he live out this term? I don't know. I suspect he will. Um,
It's all those
if
Big
he,
Macs he eats with, health food.
yeah, exactly right. Um, when he's gone, what does the Republican Party look like after that? When you no longer have the person as masterful at his WWE style approach to campaigning and generating all these people to come out and vote for him, how effective will they be? That's a big question mark for me.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not clear to me that shtick will easily transfer to another central leader. And if you don't have that central leader, then you have division and fighting and within that party to figure out what the future is going to be. But on the flip side, you also have Democrats who I think have held together because of their opposition to Trump and what's
right.
happening on the right. And there are differences there as well too. And going forward, yes, they're going to be opposed to Trump. They're going to be able to look at that, but they can't just be a party that's centered on being opposed to Trump. They've got to
Yeah,
have a vision that they can unite behind as to what they want to promote for the country. So there's challenges no matter which way you look at it.
yeah,
And I'll
yeah,
be curious to see what unfolds.
yeah. It's good. It is going to be fascinating. I'm going to also, Elon Musk has been an interesting, irritating
Yeah.
phenomenon for me.
Boy.
He's just as dysfunctional and broken as Trump,
He
and
is. Yes.
he's doubled his fortune since the election, and we know why he's in it too, right? He's money.
Right.
Um, are we yeah, and of course we're naive to say money hasn't been big since before Musk, because it has been.
Right.
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 The Citizens United decision has just opened a Pandora's box.
Right.
Whether it was constitutional or not is another question. The point
Right.
simply is it's opened a Pandora's box.
Right.
And um, but I've said for a long time that an oligarchical republic.
Right. Yeah.
And that is, we still get to vote, and the American people still make a difference in elections. But let's be honest, the oligarchs are in charge, and they're pulling the strings. Are
Right.
we? Is 2025 the year of the oligarch? What do you think?
Well, it sure feels like it. I mean, Trump's appointed all these billionaires to his cabinet and got Musk working to try to basically intimidate people. One issue we haven't brought up too, I think, is also the issue of the free press.
Yeah.
Trump just sued ABC, and
Yep.
actually, looking at that case, Stephanopoulos may very well have lost a case like that based on what they would have tried in a court. I don't know, but some of these others, like suing the Des Moines Register and the
Yeah.
pollster who blew the poll there. I mean, where was the inappropriateness? They screwed up, yes,
Yeah.
but
They screwed up. They got it wrong.
you have to show that there was malice,
Yeah.
that there was intent to mislead. But the whole point is that's the issue. There doesn't need to be. They just sue everybody and try to intimidate everybody to having to spend money in order to exercise their right to free speech and to make their criticisms of him.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're going to try to silence dissidents, and then also trying to come after anybody who leaks information from the government
Yeah.
that tells us what's going on in terms of nefarious activities. They're going to come hard after those. So that's another angle of which I think we're
Well,
going to.
and the Republicans in the House have come out with a report and recommending that Liz Cheney be investigated for criminal behavior because of January 6th.
Right. Yeah.
This clearly will be. I mean, I think it's going to be the grievance presidency.
Right.
Donald Trump.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Donald Trump has to always be right.
Right.
He has to always prevail.
Right.
And anyone, I mean, I read something, and I don't know whether it'll happen or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if Trump tries it, is that he wants to have Congress officially declare that he won the 2020 election
Oh yeah. Yeah.
because he just can't stand the thought that he
Right.
lost.
Right.
He has, and so he is going to act in order to be vindicated,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I think we're going to see this. Now I don't know. I don't know on what kind of a scale. Uh, um, there's lots of things. There's lots of things that are going to occupy the president's time, just because, right? Other than this,
Right.
but he really is a small man, and
Yeah.
he. Uh, so I do. I mean, and I do. I mean, I don't think freedom of the press is going anywhere anytime soon. But I think he's going to do his best
Right.
to get at what he wants because he just needs to be right. He can't be
Right.
wrong. He can't lose anything, and he's never wrong, and he never makes a mistake. So
Right.
I think we're going to see more of it. I don't know where it's going to go, but we're clearly going to see more of it.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's true.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll see what
We'll
happens.
see what happens. We'll see what's going to be
It,
interesting, Michael. Plenty of conversations over the next year, right?
yeah,
Plenty of things to talk about.
and I think one of the challenges for me is with so much of this, there are so many directions, so many of these things could go. You can sit here and you can get your mind spinning on the eventual uh, permutations of stuff developing down a particular track, and you get your mind all worked up in that direction, and then you find out 2 weeks later he's completely changed and gone off in a different
Yeah,
direction.
that's right. Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
you can spend yourself getting riled up and
Yeah.
worked up over all these various things that are said, but until actions begin to be
Yeah.
taken,
Right.
it's hard to know where to focus our energies
Yeah.
and what to respond to.
Yeah.
And I think that is not accidental.
Yeah.
His whole uh, strategy is to have chaos. That's
Right.
to
Yep.
keep people off balance,
Yep.
to have chaos.
Yeah.
So let's keep our heads and be calm and try to take things as they happen.
Yeah.
You and I are not able to pull any strings or levers. That's all going to happen beyond us, and ours is going to be more responsive than directive.
Yeah. Exactly.
But we'll see what happens. I was going to say in terms of 2025 going forward, I think there are some other issues that are out there that have nothing to do with who's in power. I think it's just the nature of where the economy's headed. Some of those type of things we keep talking about. For instance, the yield curve. the bond rates are going up. We have had an inverted yield curve where it used to be for several months you could get a higher interest rate on a short-term loan than on a long-term loan. That's not the way it's supposed to work. And usually when we have come out of those, it signals rising inflation and often a recession. Most of the time it indicates a recession. If Trump comes in and does his tariffs, and particularly if he starts doing deportation at massive levels, doesn't have to get 11 million people, but even if it's 2 or 3 million people,
Sure.
if he does something like that, um, you end up decreasing the workforce in some of the most critical areas like agriculture and hotel management and certain construction industries, that type of thing. So you're going to decrease the labor that's available for that, which means the costs are going to go up because you have to pay more to get the stuff produced. Add tariffs on top of that, and you have to pay more for the goods that you want to import. That's going to cause costs to go up. Meanwhile, we have a affordable housing shortage in the country. Need to build more housing. Well, guess what? If the interest rates are going up, it makes it more expensive to buy that affordable house. If you have tariffs, you can't import some of the materials you need at a decent price, which means the price of the house is going to go up. And if you can't get construction workers to work on building the house, you're not going to get the houses built except the extremely high labor costs, which means that affordable housing is going to become a whole lot more expensive. And we see issues with the automobile market, with several things. There's a lot of stuff that points to me that this 2025 economy, regardless of whether Trump actually gets his tariffs in there or not, is going to be a bumpy ride. We'll see what happens. He's going to do his tax cuts. That's going to put more money into the economy in some ways, but we'll just have to see. There's a lot of questions out there.
Let me ask you a quick question. We got to wrap it up, but I'm thinking about, you talk about tax cuts. And I'm thinking about all these billionaires and Michael, do you think they pay a fair share of taxes?
Probably not.
Yeah.
I think, what's fair, but
I mean, I realize that's subjective, but
right.
but I mean,
But I would personally, what I would like to see is I'm not opposed to a low corporate tax rate. I think corporate taxes being low would be fine, but you need to increase the income tax collection that occurs, that people collect when they actually get their income. So keeping corporations, it's kind of can discourage investment, can discourage economic growth. But overall, whether corporate taxes, income taxes, whatever, I do think that it would probably we need more. They should be contributing more to the functioning of society and our systems.
There's kind of an unspoken social contract we all have, right?
Right.
That and by the way, if I'm just selfish, for no other selfish reasons than selfishness, I have a stake in your well-being and your flourishing.
Yeah, exactly. Should. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Because when you're doing well, I'm doing well. I mean, that's the idea. And I struggle with this. I don't know if Michael, if I woke up tomorrow morning, found out that I inherited $1 billion, I think I would, first of all, after they'd have to do CPR on me.
Right.
I think I would have to say, I can't keep all this.
Right.
I cannot keep all. There's just moral. I have no moral justification for keeping this.
Right. Right. And I think that one of the challenges that's happened with globalization is that so much of what these rich billionaires have, what they have is not cash. What they own is assets in corporations and companies that they own, that they're managing. And it used to be that our companies were relatively confined. Most companies were relatively confined to their own country. And over the past 50 or 60 years, because you can now export and import, your companies can become massively larger, which means if you're the CEO and you have a big percentage stock holding, if you have the same percentage that was held 50 or 60 years ago, that's going to be a huge number now, because the companies have gotten so large. And so you have the people that are in charge of those companies that are now controlling that kind of wealth. But the wealth that they're generally controlling is in forms of their ownership in companies, not bricks of gold or cash sitting in an account somewhere. So I think that's that's part of it is how do we think about that? I think there's that's beyond the scope of this video, but I mean I think that's an
Yeah.
interesting question. But yes, I think from the broader standpoint, another way I would phrase it, let's put it this way: we in our country tend to view things that the idea that everybody should be accountable for themselves, for taking care of themselves, and they should be responsible. And so getting government off our back so people can take care of themselves is the best way for society to be full and flourishing. In the Scandinavian model, the idea is that it's when people feel secure, that when they are stable is when they're able to take the most risk in terms of business ventures, in terms of
Yeah.
improving their lives, improving others. And so you have a heavy investment in making sure people have stable lives, that they have a decent education, that their health is relatively cared for. Because when they have those stable lives, they're then able to be more innovative and risk taking and to work productively. They're more productive in the work that they do. I lean more towards that model now than I have in the
Yeah.
past. So we will never be Denmark. We're not going to be a Scandinavian country, but I think something that comes closer to approaching that model. Maybe that's the better way to say it.
Well, and as someone who is a pastor who worked in areas, urban areas where there's poverty, I mean that's true. That poor families, when they have a sense of, if they don't have enough sense of security, they don't have
Right,
enough sense of, they don't know, they don't have hospital care, say or they don't, a big hospital bill,
right,
and so they don't have a sense of doing something and trying to find a way to, I hate to use the word better themselves. That's not the way to say it,
right.
but it's
Yeah,
because they don't have a sense of security. They don't have a sense, so we who don't live in that world want to say, why don't you do this, that, or the other? Well,
right,
you
right,
don't live in their world, and,
right,
and you
right,
don't face. I mean, I was just when I was in urban ministry, I'd go home heartbroken sometimes listening to the younger children, 8, 9, 10 years old,
right,
who for them the thought of college was, even going to school was not even an option. And
right.
and to so anyway, that's
Yeah,
I'm just saying that I think from what I have seen in dealing with people who in poverty is that reinforces your point.
yeah.
And I think we need to start thinking along that lines, but it's going to be yeah, we just elected somebody who doesn't think along those lines. So
Right,
anyway,
right. But just remember, counter revolutions.
counter revolution. We're
So
there, Michael. We're
that's
there.
right.
Well, listen, we got to wrap it up. This has been a good discussion.
Right.
Wow. Well, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and a
Yeah.
great 2025, and we'll be back here in January to talk about something, I'm sure.
Yes.
We will have the results of the Super Bowl. No, 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 that's not till February, so never
We'll
mind. We'll
be
have to wait.
deep in the playoffs at that point.
We'll
Yeah.
be deep in the playoffs. Yeah. So we'll have some conversation about that. Anyway, well,
Right.
thanks again, as always, for your insight, your wisdom. I do appreciate it very much. And friends, thank you for watching and for being part of this conversation. Please don't forget, before you leave, if you're watching on YouTube, to subscribe. Um, it's free, and if you're listening on podcast, to follow. So we appreciate that. This is Faith Seeking Understanding. I'm Allan Bevere. The patron saint of Faith Seeking Understanding is Anselm of Canterbury, who said, I do not understand in order to believe, but I believe in order to understand. So, friends, keep seeking.